for the record, this is June 16th, 2020. This meeting is being held by the Minnesota Senate Judiciary and Public Safety Committee. We're going to be visiting today on a number of issues that really was sparked by the tragic death of George Floyd. The death of George Floyd.
All right, I'm in.
The death of George Floyd never should have happened, and especially not in the manner that he passed. There are a number of issues that are triggering this discussion, namely the whole role of police departments, the use of force, and other issues that we are going to be taking care of today, or not taking care of, but at least having a discussion. Before I get into this, though, I wanted to kind of review just a quick bullet list of the issues that we're going to be talking about. We have 5 bills. They're going to be covering enhanced training for law enforcement officers regarding crisis intervention, cultural diversity, mental illness, to name a few. The other one is helping police officers deal with stress and trauma after critical incidents, expanding background checks for employees of law enforcement agencies. Also, other issues regarding the holding law enforcement accountable for actions, mandatory reporting of deadly force incidences to the BCA, banning chokeholds and neck restraints through a uniform policy on use of force, requiring a duty to intervene and report for officers on the scene of excessive force incidences, and instructing officers to preserve what is now being termed the sanctity of life as it applies to police enforcement and the use of non-deadly force whenever possible. There have been a number of conversations over the past weeks about the issues of race, discrimination, law enforcement, and how local units of government have handled these issues. This conversation is absolutely necessary, and it must continue to happen not only on the state level, but on the local level as well. It's designed to foster positive relationships between communities and the officers who police them. As a society, we should be focused on public safety, not anarchy, as communities discuss these very important and legitimate concerns. Many of the problems we have watched unfold in the last few weeks in Minneapolis will continue to exist at the local level unless we continue the focus in a very concentrated form and in the very cities and neighborhoods where the events occurred. Today, we're not going to resolve decades of issues in Minneapolis or in the state of Minnesota, or, sad to say, we're not going to eradicate racism by simple legislation. But we are continuing what seems to be a never-ending discussion on how to treat our fellow citizen with respect and dignity as we try to protect them with our law enforcement, but also giving our citizens the ability to develop trust in that authority as well. Today, we're going to begin our hearing. First, we're going to review all 5 bills in a row. From then, we will move into public testimony, and we have quite a few testifiers today. Each will be given 3 minutes to make comments. We've already instructed them to the time limit. I'm going to try and call at least 2 testifiers at a time, so people who are expected to get in line, they can start getting their notes together. When you do speak as a testifier, please make reference to the bill number. We're going to go through those 5 bills first, and if you have a specific comment regarding a distinct bill, please give us that number. We'll ask you if you miss it. Our members, I would appreciate if you hold your comments and questions until we get past the testimony. We don't have as much time as the House had Saturday were intended to conclude by 11. We might be able to go just a hair over that, but nevertheless, we're going to try as a target for that. The first bill up is Senate File Special Session Senate File number 1. That's a bill that I have chief authored. Our members will be a little more familiar with it. In 2017, the legislature, along with Governor Mark Dayton, worked together to enact a law mandating specific law enforcement training requirements. Since January of 2018, all full-time and part-time peace officers must participate. This is the first time we've had a must participate on these topics for 16 hours of in-service training every licensing cycle. These are topics of crisis intervention, mental illness crises, conflict management and mediation, and recognizing and valuing community diversity and cultural differences to include implicit bias training. Prior to 2017, the cost of state reimbursement was only $3 million per year, which is a part of the base already and will remain in place. But since July 2017, the state's annual reimbursement has been moved up in reference to that 2017 legislation to $9 million, jumping from 3 up to $9 million per year, which now become permanent. There is one caveat. There is a 4-year sunset on that funding. It will expire after next year. The incidents that we've seen in the last few weeks is beginning to tell me that we need to make that commitment now for that continued training on these specific areas, not limited to, but these specific areas that have been somewhat neglected in the list of law enforcement training prior to that time. I'm going to call on our finance researcher, Chris Turner, and he can explain the bill in a more technical manner. Chris, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, actually, you did a pretty good job. It's this pretty straightforward bill. It makes the annual $6 million appropriation for police reimbursements permanent by deleting the fiscal year 22 sunset clause. That permanently increases annual training base from 3 million to 9 million starting in the next fiscal year. I guess to give you some idea what the training universe is, in 2019, the total training costs statewide were $43 million. And at a $9 million state reimbursement, that comes out to about a 20% reimbursement rate. That reimbursement rate varies from agency to agency, as some, small agencies and larger agencies have different training needs and costs. But right now we're at about a 20% reimbursement rate, and this bill will continue that on a permanent basis, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Having reviewed the first bill, we'll now move on to Senate File number 3, and that's Senator Ingebrigtsen. Senator Ingebrigtsen, are you with us?
I am with you with all my technology, Senator. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senate File number 3 is the bill title is Reporting Law Enforcement Use of Deadly Force to BCA. I'll first start out by qualifying, I guess, a little bit of who I am for those that do not know that are listening. I've been in the Senate now for approximately 13 years. Previous to that, I had 34 years of law enforcement experience. In the last 16 of those years, I was the elected sheriff in Douglas County, West Central Minnesota. So I've had a lot of experience dealing with different types of incidents when it comes to police and public contact, and understand the importance of training and understand the importance of reporting things. So committees like ourselves and like city councils and mayors can take information and try and understand where they're at. So the bill itself is real quickly requires law enforcement agencies to report information about each incident of law enforcement use of force that results in death or great bodily harm to the BCA, to the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, in line with the federal requirements that are law now. The BCA is to provide a uniform form and will collect the information monthly and make it publicly available, and further submit it to the federal government for inclusion in the NIBRS database, which is short for National Incident Based Reporting System. This bill is supported by public safety, and I believe the conversations we've had as of late, currently about 70% of the law enforcement agencies already provide this information to the BCA. And the BCA is currently working with other agencies to continue to increase that number. This is a very reasonable request. I see no problem with it whatsoever. I see law enforcement agencies stepping up, and again, over 70% of them. And my guess is, Mr. Chair and members, is that it is the larger agencies that are doing that. When you get down to the 1 and 2 and 3 numbered agencies, a chief and one person or two people in our smaller rural communities, they're probably having a little more difficulty with that. But I would also not even guess, but know that they have very few of those incidents, if at all, ever. So that's the bill in its simplest form. If staff would like to follow up on that, go ahead. But that's Senate file number 3.
Mr. Backus, our policy researcher, would you explain the bill from a research perspective?
Mr. Chair and members, really it's a pretty short bill, and Senator Ingebrigtsen hit on all the main components, so I don't have anything particular to add. I'll just clarify that the bill technically addresses serious bodily harm or death, which I think is the federal language. So I think that's probably similar to great bodily harm or maybe substantial bodily harm. But besides that, Senator Ingebrigtsen pretty much covered everything.
I think one of the items that I wanted to make sure the public knew is that the BCA would be the one creating a specific uniform form, and will collect the information monthly and make it publicly available. Some of these departments that don't have this policy don't necessarily do all of that. And I think it's vitally important for the public to understand what is happening in their communities and have it available for them to research on their own. We'll move on to the next bill, bill number 3 on our list, also by Senator Ingebrigtsen, regarding public safety peer support activity. Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the Senate file number 5 is something that I've been working on bipartisanly with Senator Bigham on the DFL side, and there was a lot of interest with regards to this on the and we'll be referring to the work group that was chaired or co-chaired by Commissioner Harrington, as well as Attorney General Ellison, over the about a 7-month period when we talked about different issues, when we talked about high stress incidents for police. One of these came from there, and this is one of them. And what happens is officers get themselves into, or firemen or first responders get into some situations where they see a lot of mayhem, a lot of basically horrible situations that the general public doesn't see, and they're always the first responder. They're always the first person on the scene, and it can be very devastating and very shocking even those that say, well, no, that's just part of the job. Well, I know that that's not, it is part of the job, but that's not always necessarily the answer. So they need help. They need help occasionally to talk about this. And if you don't get to those underlying issues that are bothering officers that see this kind of stuff, you might end up with somebody who could actually do something that wouldn't be normal because of this particular stress, and it's not been dealt with. But the bill updates the current law on public safety peer counseling and debriefing by first updating the peer review language to a peer support services model, and introduces a new concept of critical incident stress management. Under current law, there is a prohibition on receiving the counseling or debriefing, and if any of this information is improperly disclosed, it may not be used as evidence for personal matters or occupational licensing decisions. This bill expands the protection so that any information disclosed during the peer support services may not be used as evidence in any civil, criminal, or administrative hearings. Excuse me, I forgot to shut my phone off. So in basically, the basic concept is that these people can know that there's going to be peer-to-peer emotional and psychological support and coaching techniques that will be used and that are available to them after these particular stressful events, which they have to talk to and they have to talk about them. They can't just store them in a little box and expect that to just go away. And I know that for myself, some of the situations that I've seen, and a little bit of an old timer that I am, and that is what you did back then, is you did put them in and compartmentalize them, and you did do that. But I think we have to move on from that, and we're starting to see the results of that, whether it be alcoholism, whether it be divorce, or whether it be suicide, or whether it be handling a person in a manner that which they shouldn't be doing. So that's basically what it is, the bill. And if staff can help me a little further with that, or have any ideas that I didn't cover, Mr. Chair.
Kathy Pontius, welcome back. You have to unmute your phone or your computer. You might want to try it one more time. The unmute, it's at the bottom of the grid of photos. There you go.
Okay, it worked.
Welcome back. It's nice to see
Thank
you.
you.
Wow. Good to see you.
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple things to add to what Senator Ingebrigtsen said. As he mentioned, this basically does expand on current law and goes beyond just what you think of as the traditional counseling and debriefing, and focuses on a broader picture under Section 2 in particular of this stress management concept. There is overlap between these two provisions. For example, if you look at in Section 2, the stress management, that may in fact include the peer support activity that you have in Section 1. It also has a kind of a broader, I think, career-related stress management component to it that isn't there under current law. And a lot of it is terminology changing and just updating definitions. One thing I'll point out, if you look on page 3, subdivision 2, the general rule on prohibiting disclosure of information, the whole confidentiality component, there have been some concerns raised that this language may inadvertently be too broad, and that it might prevent the disclosure of even information that wasn't identifying per se, or else maybe it was needed for some particular purpose. So that there may be some suggested changes to that language to conform both to the Data Practices Act for government data. There may be other cases where it's not government data, so that kind of needs to be addressed. So that's, I think some different parties, I know the Newspaper Association and the County Attorneys Association are interested in just fleshing this language out and working on something there. So that's one issue that's out there right now. And I think that's all I have to add to it at this point in time.
Ms. Pontius, do you know of language in the form of an amendment that might cover the data practice issue that you just referenced?
Mr. Chairman, it's in the works, apparently. I have not
right.
seen anything, so I'm staying tuned for now, and
All right.
we'll see what we've got, but
Okay, thank you.
Mr.
you're
Chair.
welcome.
Senator Ingebrigtsen?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, and I think you just pointed out the importance of moving slowly with some of these things and making sure they get right and not don't act knee-jerk type that we have an occasion to do here in the legislature. So I appreciate the staff working on an amendment to help cut the rough edges off of this bill or any bill for that matter. And we have to do it right. Just simple as that. So thank you.
This will conclude the description of that particular bill, Senate File Number 5. The next bill for consideration is Senate File 49, also written by Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Mr. Chair, seems like I've had a busy day here, but nevertheless, I'm very, very fortunate to be able to work on some of these issues. Senate File 49 is titled Law Enforcement Agency Hiring Information Access Expansion. The bill expands the current law that requires law enforcement agencies to conduct thorough background investigations on applicants for employment as peace officers with that law enforcement agency. Current law authorizes the agency to request employment information about police officer applicants from the applicant's current and former employers, and the statute provides the specific process and requirements for doing so. Refusals of employers to release information about applicants is also covered under the current law and lays out what a sworn officer may get, that a sworn officer may get a ex parte court order requiring the disclosure by the applicant's current or former employer. This bill expands the provisions listed above to include employment candidates for other positions in law enforcement agencies besides licensed peace officers, such as administrative employees or jail staff. Additionally, the law is being expanded to allow law enforcement agencies authorized representatives to get a court order to compel disclosure and not just sworn peace officers. All other statutory standards will remain in place and must be followed. This is certainly an issue that I dealt with being a CEO of an agency for 16 years. And when you have applicants that come in, it's very important to do a thorough background investigation, actually go into the community where they used to live. And for sure, you want to talk to the employers and get a feel for what this officer was, why he or she is moving. Would it have been because of termination? Would it have been because they had trouble doing this or that? A very thorough investigation. Of course, psychological evaluation is in the business what we call a no-brainer. That has to happen. And in fact,
there you go.
That has to happen before a candidate, frankly, in fairness to everybody, and before a candidate even goes to an academy or goes to school, because if they don't pass that, they're probably not going to get a job. So it really isn't fair, and you don't want those kind of candidates going out there in the workforce, and it's very crucial that that's done. And we talked a lot about that in the work group, and I think there was a pretty good consensus with regards to doing those backgrounds. There was even talk, Mr. Chair, if I may, there was talk about the possibility of doing them more frequently. And I think we should be open to that. If there's incidents that happen, I think, of course, if there's a incident like obviously the Floyd incident or another incident where officers are not in this case where they've been arrested and are being charged, but if they are on administrative leave, at the very least, they would have to go through something like this to even get put back on the street. So a lot of concern and a lot of questions about that. I certainly think that's a good idea. I don't know if this bill goes that far. Maybe staff can help me with that, but that's it pretty much in a nutshell.
All right. Was there a staff member who wanted to explain the bill in more detail than what Senator Ingebrigtsen had? I thought maybe they were going to get involved in that, but perhaps not. I think it's fairly self-explanatory. We'll now move on to Senate File 104, the post-board use of force. That's the fifth item, number of bills on our agenda. This is a bill that is authored by myself, and we're asking the legislature to consider that today. And as I mentioned before, there's been many conversations over the past weeks regarding the issues of race and discrimination, how law enforcement is involved, and how local units of government have handled these issues. The use of force is something that we have to talk about. It's vitally important that we revisit this issue in light of what happened over the last few weeks, if not for the last few years. It's become clear to me that on occasion, the state has to step in when a local unit of government fails to act. This bill is directing the Peace Officer Standard and Training Board, otherwise known as the Post Board, to update their use of force policy. At a minimum, we as a state must step in and ban what happened to George Floyd's case. A police officer absolutely should not be restricting a person's airway or kneeling on a person's neck when the person is, especially when the person is handcuffed or incapacitated, or when a person is not resisting arrest, or when they're not threatening others with violence. Under current law, state and local law enforcement agencies in Minnesota have a use of force policy in place, and annual training on this policy is mandatory. The difference is the Post Board already has this model policy that local agencies may use, but with passage of this bill, local agencies will be required to adopt an updated version that the Post Board suggests. We have heard from a variety of individuals affected by recent riots, as well as those due to the underlying issues that caused those riots. We're trying to react by telling the Post Board our expectations of what the minimum standards need to include, but we're leaving the exact details to the Post Board, who have the experience that we in the legislature do not have. In updating the policy, the Post Board must include what is referred to in police reform circles as sanctity of life standards, by including a duty to intervene, which is in this bill, if an officer sees another officer using excessive force, a duty to report that abuse when an officer sees or observes that excessive force being applied, and banning chokeholds and neck restraints that restrict airways of individuals. At the same time, we understand there's a balance, because we do not want to prevent a peace officer from saving a human life when a violent person is intent on killing someone. We're asking that the board that licenses peace officers to write the policy that will help local agencies be accountable to the citizens they serve, many of which do not have problems as they do in Minneapolis. But because of Minneapolis, this is now the situation we in the state must face. This approach adds this new sanctity of life element to chokehold bans and accountability to the annual training that law enforcement is already required to do. What we're doing here today, requiring a uniform policy, does not end with this bill, because it then must be adopted by local units of government and acknowledged in written form. There's also a concern that if the post board does not take the lead on this model policy, many smaller law enforcement agencies will not be able to do this work quickly or entirely on their own. And I think those are legitimate concerns for the smaller agencies. Moving this direction requires a little more heavy lift from the post board. They can use their collective experience and the rulemaking staff position we funded last year for just this type of work and to provide the framework that we want to see in uniform policy. We heard from the post board that they're already beginning discussion on this policy and update, and they're planning on voting on it later this year. The new elements we're proposing today must become a part of a much larger and continued conversation. Conversations about race, the value of human life, respect and dignity for our fellow citizen, accountability, developing positive community building relationships between citizens and the police. You have the bill before you, Senate File 104, and we can get into it a little more in detail, but you will see not only the requirement for policies, the requirement for the intercede factor when a police officer sees another issue, and a duty for police officers to report any illegal use of force by another peace officer. I will conclude my comments now, and we will move into our testimony phase. First person that will be addressing us, actually the first three commissioners will be addressing us. We'll be starting with Commissioner Harrington, who is our DPS commissioner. Senator, you were a senator, commissioner, and welcome back to our committee. If you have comments, please share them with us now.
Thank you, Senator Limmer, and members of the committee. My name is John Harrington. I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Public Safety. About a year and a half ago, Attorney General Keith Ellison and I were having conversations. So it was right after we had taken office as part of the Walz administration. The Attorney General had taken his office as the Attorney General, and we were having conversations with community all over the state of Minnesota about officer-involved deadly force encounters. They were mainly around officer-involved shootings. Since that time, though, what I can tell you is that a working group, including Senator Ingebrigtsen, Representative Rena Moran, and a wide variety of community academics, philanthropic, and including law enforcement, sheriffs, police chiefs, and police unions, were convened as part of a deadly force reduction working group to actually study the topics that you're talking about today. The working group met for about 8 months thereabouts, and came up with 28 recommendations. And what I want to say to you is that beyond the conversations that we'd had that started the working group, beyond the 50 different testifiers that came over the course of the working group, the voices of the community have been continuing to be heard, asking for police reform. You can see this not just in the Twin Cities, although certainly we saw that during the period of civil unrest, but you can see it in Moorhead, you can see it in Lakeville, you can see it in Anoka County and Olmsted County, you can see it most recently in St. Cloud, where the voices of those who are demanding change are continuing to ask for support. As part of the working group, we met in St. Paul at the Senate, in the Capitol. We met in Mankato, Cloquet, Brooklyn Park, and then had listening sessions in Worthington and Bemidji. And in each of those places, we heard from folks that were not only concerned about deadly force encounters, but were just as concerned about police-community relations and a breakdown in trust between the police and their community. The working group came up with 28 recommendations. And what I want to say to you is that those 28 recommendations were not just what we heard, but they were the subject of heated debates and consultation and bringing in some of the best and the brightest from around the United States to advise us about what was best practices, whether it is from the police chief in Camden, where I went out to visit a department that has employed the sanctity of life and duty to intervene and has seen dramatic reductions in one of the toughest cities in the United States, or whether it was the folks from the Autism Society who came in and advised us about how the look of someone in an autistic crisis is so similar to what we've been trained to see in someone who is actively resistant. As we talk to folks, greater Minnesota is overrepresented, actually. I think many people think deadly force encounters and police community relations issues are a Twin Cities issue, but 60% of the deadly force encounters that happen in the state of Minnesota happen in greater Minnesota, not in the Twin Cities area. Finally, the last aha moment was that whole need for a co-responder model. 50% of the people that are killed in police encounters are in the midst of either a mental health crisis or some kind of a substance abuse crisis. The working group came up with 28 recommendations categorized around 5 different topics: community healing engagement, prevention and training, investigations and accountability, policy, and then officer wellness. One of the things that was surprising to me was how clearly in agreement officer wellness was in terms of the need for having healthy cops that are working.
Commissioner Harrington, Commissioner, I'm just reminding you, there's a time limit of 3
I'm
minutes.
just wrapping up, sir, I promise.
Okay, all right.
So I've got my clock on also, I apologize.
Okay.
So, the whole issue of how do we build trust and how do we hold officers accountable was part of the working group. And I really do encourage you to look with Senator Ingebrigtsen at all 28 of the recommendations that came out of the working group. We really do believe that those were vetted. They are based out of the greater Minnesota community, and they were agreed upon by sheriffs and chiefs of police and union officials as being best practices the state of Minnesota should follow. And I really do believe that at this time, we are desperately in need to make sure that not just a few of those recommendations, but all of those recommendations are seriously given consideration and looked at as future public policy. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner. Next would be Commissioner Paul Schnell from Department of Corrections, followed by Rebecca Lucero, our Commissioner from the Department of Human Rights. Commissioner Schnell, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Paul Schnell, and I'm the Commissioner of Corrections. As many of you know, prior to my current role, I served in a variety of law enforcement positions, both officer and chief in a variety of communities. As I thought about my comments today, I asked myself the question, what's the problem that people in our state are expecting to be solved? And the answer, I believe, is first and simply they want to be able to trust their law enforcement. They want to be able to trust their police. And second, that any policy changes must enhance assurances that law enforcement will serve Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities fairly and equitably. It is with this backdrop that I offer my comments today. While the policy proposals before you today address some of those concerns, I don't believe they go far enough. Because of the leadership of the people of color and Indigenous caucus to elevate the voices demanding transformational change to policing, we have an opportunity to move that forward. Chair and committee members, now is the time for reform in police arbitration, discipline cases. The current system of arbitrating discipline cases is not structurally impartial, which advances mistrust, and it's missing from, I think, the proposal before you today. Now is the time to further broadly enhance police data collection and reporting that truly helps us know the difference between good policing and bad policing, which is essential and being demanded by communities across our state. Now is the time to empower the post board to hold individual police officer licensees accountable, not just accountability to their employers, but to the state who grants them these licenses. And as I close here, Chair and members, I would just say that On June 5th, Senator Gazelka said, and I quote, "Minnesota needs to lead the nation in race reconciliation," end quote, and I couldn't agree with him more. Moving forward on transformational change is what we must do. Chairs and members, the spotlight is turned on us. The world is watching as Minnesota is at the center of yet another tragedy that is affecting communities across our nation. It has resulted in mass protests, not just in Minnesota, in communities large and small, but across the globe, Europe, Pakistan. Right now is the time for us to act. Minnesota is watching us as we either take this moment to address these issues and enact transformational changes that really speak to the high quality of policing that Minnesota deserves. And frankly, that is something that can easily be done with just being able to more effectively measure what's happening in law enforcement and addressing some of the proposals that were brought forward by the Posse Caucus.
30 seconds.
We cannot accept that things will just calm down after this. We cannot accept that we're going to just get back to normal. I don't believe that's possible. We must finally listen to the people demanding change and accept no less. I urge you, committee members, to look at these proposals and find ways to move this forward. And I thank you for the time.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll move to Rebecca Lucero, Commissioner of Human Rights, and then followed by Brian Peters from the MPPOA. Commissioner Lucero, welcome.
Hi, good morning all. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Yep, my name is Rebecca Lucero, the Commissioner for the Minnesota Department of Human Rights, Minnesota's Civil Rights Enforcement Agency. It's good to be here with you all today. I'm here to talk specifically about the package of bills that we are discussing right now regarding police reform. And as I started to think about my comments today, I really felt like it was important that I start by talking about Dominic Felder. If you haven't heard the name of Dominic Felder, he was killed in 2006 by police officers who shot and killed him. Dominic Felder died 8 blocks away from where George Floyd was killed by members of the same precinct. I was a new attorney when Katie Felder, Dominic's mom, brought forward this case. I was one of many young attorneys who had the honor of working on that case, along with a phenomenal team who taught me so much that I carry with me today. During that case, we talked extensively about how police respond to folks who are dealing with mental health crisis. We talked extensively about how the police need to protect community, not quickly resorting to killing folks. Dominic Felder was unarmed and he was shot in the back repeatedly. In 2011, Minneapolis paid out what was at that point one of the largest settlements and promised to make substantive changes to its policies and procedures. Yet here we are today. Since then, there have been countless studies and agreements and policies that have been talked about. They've been talked about with legislators, with policy wonks, with police officers, with community groups and advocates. And we're still here. So we need to make these broad structural changes, and the time is now. We all know it. We have the solutions in front of us, and we're here today because we're faced with that moment and opportunity. So just 2 weeks ago, our department launched a civil rights investigation looking at the systems and policies in place in Minneapolis Police Department. And Mr. Chair, legislators, please know that we deeply appreciate the support that the Senate has already shown in that investigation. In a very short time, we have already worked on some important structural changes. I'm talking about an outright banning of chokeholds and neck restraints immediately from Minneapolis. We moved forward on this quickly because we know we cannot wait. Lives are at stake. And Mr. Chair and members of the committee, respectfully, the package of bills that we have before us today falls far short of this moment. I'm concerned that it wastes this opportunity, and I'm here today to ask you to act quickly and boldly. The immediate ban of chokeholds and neck restraints, along with other essential policies already well vetted in front of you and community, are not found today in the Senate bills. And we can do this. We can make these changes today. Developing model policies that must be adopted eventually by local agencies means we are not making the well-researched and vetted changes that need to be made immediately. So I urge this committee and the Senate to intentionally take this moment and see where we could act more boldly, to listen to Minnesotans like Valerie Castile, the mother of Philando Castile, who are asking you to make immediate and bold changes. I urge you to listen to Katie Felder, mother of Dominic Felder, who already pushed for reform back in 2010. It's time for change. Mr. Chair and members, thank you very much for your time and for allowing me to testify today on this critical legislation. Please know that Our department stands ready to work with you in order to enact any of these meaningful changes. I appreciate your work on this. Have a great day.
Thank you, Commissioner Lucero. We'll move on to Brian Peters from the Minnesota Peace and Police Officers Association, followed by Bill Hutton, the Minnesota Sheriff's Association. Mr. Peters.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Brian Peters, and I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association. I'm also a former police officer and commander from the city of Brooklyn Center. The Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association has represented Minnesota's public safety officers for nearly 100 years and currently has 10,000 plus active members in the state of Minnesota and 2,000 retired members. Thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to speak today. Members of law enforcement share the goal of improving trust between members of the community and the public, and that includes participating in ongoing conversations to improve how law enforcement officers are trained and work in the community. Each day, our members, the vast majority of all police officers, demonstrate professionalism and bravery. Police officers must earn the trust of communities we serve by treating all people with dignity, compassion, and respect. And police officers must be held to a high standard of accountability. We recognize that America's history of policing includes hard truths about race in our society, and our commitment is to move forward in a way that addresses those issues head on and restores faith in those who are entrusted with public safety. These terrible incidents unfortunately damage the reputation of everybody who wears a badge and those who used to wear the badge. These important conversations can't just happen over just a few days. The recommendations derived from the February 2020 report by the state of Minnesota's Working Group on Police-Involved Deadly Force Encounters are a good place to start those conversations. And it's important to note that I was a part of that working group. The MPPOA will continue to support programs and training that help address these issues and repair trust between law enforcement and communities of color. Specifically to the bills introduced in this committee, the MPPOA believes they strike a good balance, and we support the proposed legislation before the committee today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. We'll move on to Bill Hutton with the Minnesota Sheriff's Association, followed by Chief Matt Gottschalk from the Minnesota Chiefs Association. So, Mr. Hutton.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. Am I good to go? Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you. My name is Bill Hutton. I am the Executive Director of the Minnesota Sheriff's Association, representing the 87 sheriffs of the state of Minnesota. I am also a retired 3-term sheriff of Washington County, and I have more than 33 years of law enforcement experience. First off, I want to say the 87 sheriffs representing the state of Minnesota were shocked watching the death of Mr. Floyd. It was incredible to watch. And on a personal note, I could not watch the entire event in one sitting. I've had countless conversations with the sheriffs across the state who have been equally appalled at what the now 4 former Minneapolis police officers did. Minnesota sheriffs believe that policies under consideration by the legislature should acknowledge the vast differences that exist when it comes to agencies' personnel and financial resources. The Minnesota Sheriff's Association cannot stress enough the importance of the work done by the Police-Involved Deadly Force Encounter Working Group created by the Attorney General and DPS Commissioner Harrington. The working group included 18 members representing a cross-section of individuals advocating for and creating a vehicle towards social justice and criminal justice reform. As Commissioner Harrington said, they had multiple recommendations and action plans, which we, the Sheriffs of Minnesota, think it serves well as a catalyst for change. The MSA supports the 5 bills offered in your committee. We appreciate you taking the time. We respect that it's a measured, thoughtful approach. Each one of the files that that were described earlier are very much appreciated. Matter of fact, one of the offered, I believe it is Senate File 49, was an initiative of the MSA. This is an important bill that will assist law enforcement in making very responsible hiring decision. I might add the Minnesota sheriffs belong to a risk management or policy program called Lexipol, and the duty to intercede in sanctity of life for the 81 of 87 sheriffs that you talked about with the sanctity of life and also the use of carotid neck restraints is dealt with in the policy. As a matter of fact, my conversations with many of the sheriffs across the state, the use of carotid restraint or chokeholds, as they are referred to, is being removed from policies throughout the state by the Minnesota sheriffs. Again, the sheriffs of Minnesota will do whatever we can do to work through this process with your committee, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hutton. The next will be Chief Gottschalk, Minnesota Chiefs Association, followed by a private citizen, Lejeune Lang, I think. Chief Gottschalk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Matt Gottschalk. I'm the Director of Public Safety in Corcoran, and I'm here today to testify on behalf of the Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association, representing over 300 police chiefs from across the state. Our association has long been a strong advocate of several of the proposals being discussed both locally and nationally, and we're renewing our calls for legislative action on some of the key police reform measures that we're here in support of the bills that are currently in front of your committee. The Minnesota Chiefs Association supports Senate File 1 for the funding of law enforcement training that's important to protecting our communities. We believe the crisis intervention, conflict management, mental health awareness, and cultural competency trainings that are provided with this funding are important skills that all our officers should be equipped with. Our association also supports Senate Files 3 and 49 on use of force reporting and expanding law enforcement hiring information. We support Senate File 104, updating the post board use of force policy, specifically including the duty to intercede and duty to report mandates for officers. We also believe that Senate File 5 provides critically important protections for public safety peer support activities, and it will lead to healthier police officers serving our communities. The Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association also respectfully asked that you consider changing laws governing collective bargaining agreements that impede discipline and termination of officers who seriously betray the public trust. We think it's important for the legislature to empower the post board at the request of the chief or sheriff to review and revoke the professional license of an officer who shows a pattern of failing to follow public policy. The brutal death of George Floyd appalled and saddened all of our members. We pledge our continued commitment to these reform measures. We believe there's urgency in making the changes proposed in these bills to ensure that officers receive the training necessary to prevent biased policing and inappropriate uses of force, and that they're held accountable when it does happen. We support the work done by the Deadly Encounters Working Group and encourage using its recommendations going forward. And as leaders in the policing profession and our communities, we look forward to working with lawmakers and citizens and stakeholders to improve our officer accountability, trust in policing, and public safety services in our communities across the state. So we thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Chief. We'll now move to Lejeune Lang, and then followed by Catherine Katz. Ms. Lang, are you there?
Good morning, Chairman.
I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
That's correct.
All right.
Thank you for the opportunity to appear this morning on such short notice by this committee. One of my concerns, having been a lawyer and a judge for 21 years, is the lack of community participation and public notice by this committee before considering such weighty issues. The legislation that you are considering serves to further insulate police from legitimate investigations. There should be more input from the post board, more input from the Department of Public Safety and the Attorney General in terms of how to apply these additional layers that separate a police officer from having to tell after a critical incident what the facts are. You already have a law that insulates police officers to delay reporting and talk privately to other officers before talking to an investigator. Now you want to add a counselor and restrict that testimony. So you're complicating the access to legitimate investigative processes when an incident occurs. You have excluded community input, which is part of the 28 recommendations by the Deadly Force Reduction Working Group. The post-board leadership stood before the state of Minnesota on television, apologizing for the lack of transparency, the lack of opportunity for the public to give input with regard to its operations and procedures. And now with less than 24 hours notice and a Zoom meeting, you're seeking to make decisions on such weighty issues. I know, Senator Limmer, you are a very experienced senator and that you intend to do a good job for the people of the state of Minnesota. But this does not meet the test and the expectations of the people for this time. You've not touched body cameras. You've not talked about the operation of body cameras, the provision of body cameras, and there are so many other areas that have been omitted. So I ask that you reconsider and talk to those who operate these departments to get better input. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Appreciate that. Catherine Katz, Miss Katz, are you on board? Followed by Brian Fullman from Isaiah. Miss Katz.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I share many of the concerns of Ms. Lang, Ms. Lucero, and Commissioner Harrington. And as the Caucasian mother of an Asian son, I'm here to tell you how different his experience has been than certainly my experience or my husband's experience. And I would question, in these situations, we always hear how many, it's just a few bad apples. My son has not been a victim of violent police behavior. However, he regularly gets pulled over for crimes like driving home from work at 3 a.m. or because he works the night shift. He's a night shift manager at a theater. He's had the police called on him for skateboarding recently in a skate park. He's been the victim of an illegal search for the crime of putting skateboards in the back of his car and driving off. And these are not all incidents in Minneapolis. His greatest fear in going back to work is having to drive home at 3 a.m. as an Asian male in this state. And I see nothing in what you're proposing that gives me any confidence that his fears aren't justified. It's not enough. It doesn't allow for getting rid of bad officers. And in terms of training, there's evidence that shows training does not work. Training works for people who want to be trained. And we have way too many officers who don't want to be trained, or who ignore the training. If there's no way to discipline them after they've been trained, that has no value at all. And I would
30
also,
seconds. 30 seconds.
Well, I'll just be done. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Katz. Brian Fullman is next, followed by Justin Terrell from the Council on Minnesotans of African Heritage. Mr. Fullman.
Thank you for having me, Senator Limmer. And I appreciate this space that the committee has provided for us to be able to speak. I'm a lead organizer for Isaiah. I lead organized the barbershops and the Black Congregation Cooperative. We have been doing listen and lead sessions. We'll continue to do that across Minneapolis to hear the people who are most impacted and targeted. I just want to actually first just start off by saying that we need to have, I've been hearing that the special session is going to be over within a week. Until we can actually pass some major legislation that actually points to the systems that are protecting these kind of atrocities, I would ask that Minnesota actually look at ourselves and how we position in this country. What is the example that we're actually going to set across the country? Are we going to walk out of a burning building as it relates to our people, my people, meaning African Americans who are consistently targeted, who are maimed and mutilated in the streets? What is the actual trend? What is the model that we're going to have? We need to actually come together and come up with some kind of major legislation that actually speaks to the core of a pattern that we've seen historically in this country. Second, $6 million for training. I know I respect everybody's intention. This is not about questioning people's intention. This is about maybe we're not listening. The trainings are not working. Officer Chauvin was trained. I don't have a doubt in my body that police officers are not trained. And it's not about individual police officers. It's about the complacency of a system that protects the police officers. It's about perpetuating warrior mentality. How do we start directing our efforts and our money towards that? I just heard Philando Castile's mom in a hearing. And from what I'm hearing, a lot of these funds were actually passed in recognition and respect for her beloved son who was murdered. She just made a public profession that these trainings are not working, that she understands that we got to get to the core of what's going on here. So I want to say in closing, if you put a board together and that board is 10 police officers out of 15 members, then how do you get the true investment you need if you're going to create new policies? There is a vast amount of community that is waiting for you all to include them into these conversations to start getting to the core, and I suggest we actually do so. Thank you. Respectfully, I appreciate you all letting me have this space to talk with you all.
Thank you, Mr. Fullman. We will have next Justin Terrell, followed by Chief Kelly McCarthy, the chair of the Minnesota Post Board, to follow. Mr. Terrell, welcome to the committee.
Chair Limmer, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I also want to say thank you for taking time to meet with me after the incident in Minneapolis. It was good to check in with you. It has also been great to host Senator Gazelka in the neighborhood and to see many legislators come through the neighborhood. The task in front of you today, Chair Limmer, is not a small one. Your body tends to be very thoughtful and thorough when considering legislation, and moving at the speed that you've moved this week is commendable. And rather than go through the policies that you have in front of you today, I want to just remind us about the moment that we find ourselves in. From Dred Scott to George Floyd, Minnesota has a lot of issues to wrestle with. And I want to remind you that it's the seats of power that you all are sitting in today that are the same seats of power that built a highway through Rondo. The same seats of power that looked the other way on a lynching 100 years ago yesterday, where even an innocent man was still convicted of raping a white woman, and the pardon wasn't given to him until last week. The same seats of power that have gone along with redlining, racial covenants. The list of sins committed against our people is long in this state, and they are specific and on purpose. What happened to George Floyd was not an accident. And we didn't arrive at this moment by accident. There's a long paper trail and receipts of grievances and aggressions against Black people in the state of Minnesota. And Senator Limmer, Chair Limmer, I know you to be a good man with conviction. And I'm asking that you and this body consider this moment a Kairos moment, an opportunity to repent for the sins that have happened in the seats that you all are sitting in. I invite you to a conversation, a much larger conversation beyond policy, about Minnesota values and what we need to do to correct the situation we find ourselves in. The nation is watching. And I just want to close with this. Every single system in the state of Minnesota is failing Black folks. We have racial disparities at the zoo. The real question is that working for you? Is that working for your constituents? I would argue that we need to, and we must do much better. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Terrell. Next individual is Chief Kelly McCarthy from the Post Board, followed by Valerie Castile. Chief McCarthy, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Chair Limmer and members of the committee. My name is Kelly McCarthy, and I'm the current chair of the Peace Officer Standards and Training Board. My grandmother started her law enforcement career as a policewoman in 1958. 40 years later, I had the privilege of starting my law enforcement career as a community service officer in Lino Lakes, working my way up through the department until 2016, when I left for the opportunity to serve my hometown of Mendota Heights. I've served as the chief here since 2017. My grandmother was an amazing mentor, and one of the most valuable lessons I learned from her is that discomfort is a natural byproduct of progress. I'm here today to convey to the committee and to the public that the Post Board recognizes the need for profound and systematic change at our board and within our profession. The Post Board was created in 1979 to address a very specific issue regarding training and recruitment. Over the years, as the needs in our profession and our communities changed, the Post Board failed to adapt at the same speed. Legislation was passed that could not be fully implemented by the board, leaving a wide gap between expectation and ability. We have many changes in the works at the Post Board to close that gap, and we are going to need your continued support to do so. We need greater capacity to engage public stakeholders, collect and analyze data, and to hold bad cops accountable. I am very comfortable with all the police reform bills before you today, and that is how I know it's not enough. Now is not the time for us to be comfortable. This is the time for us to engage in the courageous, systematic changes necessary to give all Minnesotans the equality and justice they deserve. I am excited and honored to work with you and this committee in making those changes. Thank you, Chair Limmer and committee members, for your time.
Thank you, Chief. Greatly appreciate it. I'm going to ask one more time for Valerie Castile. I believe she may not be in attendance. Ms. Castile, are you on board with the meeting? Having not heard from her, we'll move to W.C. Jordan from the NAACP State Conference, and then followed by Maya Ulisse. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Mr. Jordan, are you on board?
Yes, I am on board.
All right, great. Please proceed.
Good afternoon. My name is W.C. Jordan, and I serve as the NAACP's president for the Minnesota Dakotas Area State Conference. On behalf of the NAACP State Conference, I would state that we can do more, and there are ways to make the bill stronger. It does not change the standard for whether an officer appropriately used deadly force, and that standard is too low. Today, I'm here to testify on the Senate file number 104. 100 years ago, 3 African-American men, Elias Clayton, Elmer Jackson, and Isaac McGee, were lynched by a mob of thousands in Duluth while police stood by ineffectively, having ignored clear warnings of the planned lynching from earlier in the day. The Minnesota legislature responded to that heinous crime with arguably the strongest anti-lynching legislation at the time, and became one of the first states to ban lynching altogether. The state of Minnesota needs to answer the call again to confront what has happened in the 100 years since then. For far too long, the state of Minnesota has failed to address police violence and racial inequities in our justice system. These problems have been well known and thoroughly documented since even before the Duluth lynchings. As Dr. Kenneth Clark observed more than 50 years ago while testifying to the Kerner Commission, and I quote, "I read the report of the 1919 riot in Chicago, and it is as if I were reading the report of the investigating committee on the Harlem riot of 35, the report of the investigating committee of the Harlem riot of 43, the report of the McClone Commission on the Watts riot. I must again in candor say to you, members of this commission, It is a kind of Alice in Wonderland with the same moving picture reshowing over and over again, the same analysis, the same recommendations, and the same inaction, unquote. Minnesota has been the subject of similar reports with the same sort of findings and regrettably the same inactions. In 1993, the Minnesota Supreme Court Task Force on Racial Bias in the judicial system found that the Hennepin County people of color were arrested and charged at vastly and disproportionate rates. As the task force observed, one glaring signpost of the spectrum of racism is the disposition of criminal cases and the fact that although people of color comprise 6% of the state's population, they comprise 45% of the prison population. In 2003, the Council on Crime and Justice and Institute on Race and Poverty jointly reported to the legislator, law enforcement officers stop Black, Latino, and American Indian drivers at greater rates than white drivers, search Black, Latino, and American Indians at greater rates than white drivers, and found contraband as a result of searches of Black, Latino, and American Indians at lower rates than in searches of white drivers.
Mr. Jordan, you have 30 seconds.
In closing, we need structural change. No more just nibbling around the edges on small, minor adjustments. Our policing system is broken. Our criminal system is broken. Black folk have been paying the price for that for far too long. If not now, when? We have a chance right now to actually make a substantial difference. We have been here before, but we are here now to demand that you do what is necessary this time. What will it take to finally act? As our statement details, we have had study after study and lawsuit after report, etc. Looking at this issue, what more do we need to know? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Mia, are you on board?
Hello, yes, thank you.
Could you introduce yourself? I'm having trouble pronouncing your last name.
Absolutely. My name is Mia Ulysses, for the record, and I coordinate a program called the Community Equity Program from Wilder Foundation. It is a 9-month program for people of color to learn about the legislative policymaking process and how to enact change that is meaningful in their communities that address the issues that they face. I want to speak on a couple of the proposed bills that are on the agenda today, particularly Senate File 1. I know there have been a couple of individuals that have already commented on this bill, but I want to just profess a number of concerns to me that have been already been stated, in that $6 million to appropriate for continuing training without any specificity on what the training is for, how it could be used to address inequities that we're seeing that relate to police brutality, particularly in communities of color, is, I think, a colorblind approach and is the main issue that I'm seeing with the set of bills that are put on this agenda today. I know, Senator Limmer, you had mentioned at the beginning that this is not going to solve all racism. It's not going to end all racism within the policing community, within communities across Minnesota. But I did a quick control find search just for some keywords, and I actually found that none of the bills that are being heard today have the mention of the word culture, of the mention of the word race, people of color. And so this tells me that we're taking a colorblind approach to issues that are not colorblind. And so I would encourage you all to go back to these bills and find ways to connect with community members that are leading this work and find out how we can ensure that the bills aren't being taken in a colorblind approach. On the point of the bill that's being proposed on addressing accountability measures and essentially creating mandated reporter guiding laws around police and reporting on use of excessive force, I'm in support of this bill in its concept. However, I find that there are little measures within the actual bill text that provide how the issues will be addressed if somebody fails to comply within this law. I know with mandated reporters for teachers or people that work in group homes or providing healthcare services, there are actual accountability measures that are put in. So either it's a misdemeanor or a gross misdemeanor, you can face jail time up to 90 days, a fine of $1,000, and this is on a personal account for the person and not just a slap on the hand at their employer. And so I think that if we're going to go down this route of making sure that we're trying to hold police officers accountable for the excessive force of others that they are viewing, while they're out on the streets, then we have to find ways to make sure that it's actually enforceable. Otherwise, this is not going to hold any weight once it comes down to the actual procedure of following this policy. Lastly, I just want to bring up the fact that the Posse Caucus has been working nonstop on a set of bills that have provided a lot of feedback and solicited a lot of feedback from community members across the state. We need more funding for community, not for the police. I understand that it might be second nature to say we need more funding for training, we need more funding for body cameras, we need more funding for X, Y, or Z. But if we're seeing time and time again, both in 2020, 10 years ago, 30 years ago, that putting funding towards a system that does not work for all Minnesotans is not beneficial, then I think that it's time for us to reconsider how we're going to allocate funds as a state. And if we know that community connections is absolutely important and integral to just overall quality of life and well-being, I find that the bills that the Posse Caucus is putting forth is a balance between ensuring that we're funding community, we're funding the work that needs to be done around trauma and healing, but that we're also ensuring that we're creating and building on policies that already exist, like diversifying the post board and ensuring that officers across the state are required for body cameras.
30 seconds. 30 seconds.
Senator Limmer, I understand my time. This is the start of addressing long-standing issues, and we cannot expect that if we're taking a colorblind approach to these bill proposals that we're going to get specific results on racial equity, because that is not how it works. So I am excited to see that there have been so many people commenting and testifying both online and within these formal spaces. I would encourage you all to reach out into communities. The Posse Caucus has a lot of connections on people who are on the ground doing the work, have personal experiences with these matters. I myself have my own personal experiences around police brutality as a Black woman. And so I think the time is for us to come outside of the legislature, outside of the Capitol, and even outside of our policy spaces to go to the communities that are impacted the most and collaborate on solutions that are going to be impactful for these communities that statistically are most impacted by police brutality. Thank you.
Thank you. We will be moving on to Julia Decker from the ACLU, and then Pastor Hans Lee from Calvary Lutheran Church. Ms. Decker. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Please go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're kind of coming in and out, off and on, but let's keep trying.
Mr. Chair, I will shut off my video. I will shut off my video. That sometimes helps the sound quality.
All right.
Mr. Chair, is this better?
I think so. Go ahead.
Okay. Mr. Chair and members, Julia Decker, Policy Director for the ACLU of Minnesota. The ACLU of Minnesota is committed to reimagining systems of policing and public safety in order to end police violence, address the disproportionate harms inflicted by our current systems, and to protect and advance the civil rights and civil liberties of all Minnesotans. As previous testifiers have stated, our current systems have failed. They failed George Floyd, and they have failed so many others, and they cannot be allowed to continue to fail going forward. Now, we have submitted written testimony as well, so I will be brief. My testimony pertains mainly to Senate File 104. We, the ACLU of Minnesota, urge the legislature to adopt a statewide duty for peace officers to intercede if they witness unauthorized force. It was mentioned in a hearing in the other body that many departments do already embrace this principle. And it was also included as part of the stipulation by the Minneapolis Police Department in the recent temporary restraining order as part of the Department of Human Rights ongoing investigation. We believe intervention should be mandated by state law unless certain narrowly tailored exceptions apply. ACLU of Minnesota also urges intentional movement toward continuing to narrow the circumstances when peace officers may use deadly force. Deadly force should be an absolute last resort. It should not be a preemptive action against a potential future threat. So we ask you to limit use of deadly force to circumstances only where it's necessary to protect the officer or another from imminent death or great bodily harm, and where all other measures have been exhausted. This standard preserves sanctity of life and proportionality. We also urge the legislature to ban the use of the chokeholds and neck restraints in all instances. Finally, in closing, there is much more work to be done to address the deep-rooted and systemic problems in policing and public safety and the harms they have caused, particularly to Minnesota's Black communities, Indigenous communities, and people of color. This work in both bodies of the legislature must continue beyond today, beyond these proposed changes, and the ACLU of Minnesota is committed to doing that work. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Decker. Pastor Lee, to be followed by Kathy Quick. Pastor Lee. You'll have to unmute your phone.
All right, looks like up. Okay.
And then you might be able to get on camera as well.
Unable to start video. The host
Okay.
has stopped it. Start my video. Here we go. Okay.
There you go.
Thank you very much, Senator Limmers and others on the committee for the opportunity to share a few of my thoughts. I am speaking primarily to Bill number 1, although speaking more generally, I'm not a policy person. I serve Calvary Lutheran Church on the corner of 39th and Chicago, 1 block from where Senator Limmers, from where George Floyd was murdered by Minneapolis police officers on May 25th. Our congregation is a member of Isaiah and has for a long time been committed to racial and economic justice. People in our congregation and neighborhood share in the grief, rage, and trauma that have come as a result of George Floyd's murder. The same grief, rage, and trauma that are now fueling this movement that will lead to change. We are quite certain of that. I'm pleased that the Senate Judiciary Committee is finally offering up legislation on policing. I'm, however, disappointed that it took you this long to act. An elder Black member of my congregation mentioned or said last night at our church council meeting, and she's lived in South Minneapolis most of her adult life. She asked our church at our council meeting last night, why did it take a video for people to act when we always knew that this was happening? Well, she should be testifying, and I'm glad that people like her are testifying. She and her daughter, on behalf of their 17-year-old grandson and son, who is a target every time he walks out the door, these people must be heard. And so I add my voice to those who are asking for such a process. Calvary Lutheran Church has a banner on the side of its building. This is an incredible irony. We have a banner, a Black Lives Matter banner with Calvary Lutheran Church that has been on our building, 1 block from where George Floyd was murdered, that's been on our building for 5 years or so. So people in our community are aware of what's happening and know that the time has come. It came years ago, but we're just getting to it now. SF Bill 1 focuses primarily on training and more funding for training, not a bad thing. I certainly support that, but not enough. I'm not an expert on policy, as I mentioned, and I appreciate so much what you are doing and listening in this moment. Here's the problem with training. The officers who suffocated George Floyd were well-trained officers. They were probably trained in how to treat Black bodies the same as every other body, to treat everyone they encountered with respect, trained to de-escalate. Training, however, is not a solution to lynching. You cannot train your way out of a militarized, reactive, unaccountable culture that currently infects the Minneapolis Police Department. And I'm really only speaking to that department at this point. Instead of taking a stand on use of force and de-escalation, this bill avoids accountability by deferring it to the post board, a body that itself is dominated perhaps 2 to 1 by law enforcement, which makes this problematic when there is no trust in the community.
30 seconds.
Public safety needs a fresh start in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and throughout the country. Anything short of a truly transformative process is just one more feeble attempt at responding to perhaps the greatest injustice of our time, living while Black. My community is hurting. It's time to do something to change that. Thank you, Senator Limmer, and all of you for what you're doing.
Thank you, Pastor. Kathy Quick, followed by Brent Richter. Kathy is a professor at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs. Professor Quick.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Limmer and members of the committee for considering these critical problems and reforms. As the chair just mentioned, my name is Kathy Quick. I'm an associate professor at the Humphrey School of Public Affairs and also academic co-director of the Center for Integrative Leadership. And I've been working on policing and community relations locally and nationally for almost 10 years, most prominently locally in an analysis of what went wrong in the Metro Gang Strike Force in 2011. And I want to remind us that this problem goes well beyond Minneapolis and is by no means new. Since 2017, as a designer and a lead facilitator of the Falcon Heights Task Force on Policing and Inclusion, which was formed following the killing of Philando Castile, and also since 2013 with 4 tribal governments in northern Minnesota looking at various aspects of roadway safety, including law enforcement, which has brought me into dialogue with tribal police departments as well as many county sheriff's departments. And nationally, since 2018, I've been bringing together elected officials, community leaders, survivors of police violence, and law enforcement officers from around the country who are studying and sharing and swapping the best information available on good practices for improving safety. So as several commissioners and multiple people giving testimony today have already done, I want to talk about trust. I am pro-safety, I am not anti-police, and based upon my lengthy research and observation, we get mutual safety of both community members and of law enforcement through mutual trust. And for this reason, I strongly support implementing at a bare minimum the proposed updates to the policies on the use of force by peace officers, specifically with the new language requiring that officers have a duty to intercede, to stop inappropriate use of force, and a duty to report illegal use of force. So on the duty to intercede, we know very well that de-escalation is a well-recognized key plank of policing reform. This is part of the 8 Can't Wait platform that's very well researched and established and has a great deal of support across the country. Diamond Reynolds was making an effort to de-escalate the officer who killed Philando Castile, and her child was silent in the back seat at that time. Her 4 or 5-year-old child was silent because she had trained her child to be quiet in these situations. Bystanders tried to de-escalate as George Floyd was being killed. And there's even some evidence to suggest that some of the new and junior officers, the more recently trained ones, made some modest, though unsuccessful, efforts to stop Derek Chauvin as well, as George Floyd was being killed. Officers need to be prepared to do more of this. There needs to be a duty to intervene, and that needs to be legally mandated, a standardized requirement across the board for all departments, so that it is indeed not only part of training, and I recognize the limitations of training that many other testifiers have named, but so that it changes the culture of each and every department, so that the public has trust that that is a standard in all policing in the state, and so that when there is mutual aid agreements and there are calls to assist across departments, so that that is the standard across all departments, and expectation that when an officer sees this inappropriate use of force, that they have a duty to intercede immediately.
30 seconds.
Part. Thank you. And I also just want to remind us also on the duty to report that this is indeed not a new problem, nor is it exclusively a Minneapolis problem. So I mentioned earlier that I was part of a diagnostic and analysis of the Metro Gang Strike Force, which 10 years ago made payouts to 96 victims from around the state for inappropriate use of force, including kicking a toddler in the head during a botched drug raid, terrifying immigrants into paying bribes, seizing and keeping personal property, all kinds of corruption. The bottom line of the analysis in which I was involved was that the code of silence within police departments is what allowed that to be so persistent and so pervasive. And it's what makes it absolutely necessary to have this kind of regulation to require not only a duty to intervene, but also a duty to report. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Next will be Brent Richter, clinical counselor, followed by Jim Hilbert. Mr. Richter.
Good morning, Chair Limmer and members. My name is Brent Richter. Good morning, Chair Limmer, members. My name is Brent Richter, and I'm here to speak specifically about Senate File Number 5. As a licensed Minnesota police officer since 1981 and a paid on-call firefighter and EMS person for 18 of those years, I've experienced firsthand the awful tragedies that befall first responders. And because of that, when I retired from the Minnesota State Patrol 12 years ago, I became a licensed professional clinical counselor. My private practice in Maple Grove focused on law enforcement, fire, and EMS personnel affected by critical incident traumatic events. I teach and present on the topics of CISM and first responder mental health and respond to assist in the aftermath of significant incidents throughout the state of Minnesota and around the United States. I'm currently a call captain and strategic planner with the Central Minnesota CISM team and spent 5 years with the Metro CISM team before that. We ask a lot from those who are willing to stand in harm's way to protect and serve us. We need to protect them as well. We hire new first responders, and rarely do any of them look at the backside of the badge they were just handed and read the disclaimer that the wearer assumes the risk that with every nasty, bloody, emotionally filled, gut-wrenching, life-impacting, and/or moral challenging response, there is a likelihood that a little bit of their humanity will be lost. This is where Senate File 5 will help by fostering a safer and more protected process where thoughts and feelings between personnel and peer support activity members can be exchanged openly and honestly. CISM and especially peer support programs help alleviate, mitigate, and transform the immediate and enduring remnants of those disruptive events by normalizing them and assuring that the responder is not alone. They're supported throughout by their agencies and through trained peers. The bedrock of a successful peer support program is the one-on-one conversation between the responder and the trained peer that has specific training in listening, assessing, providing support, and helping with referral resources when necessary. The ability to provide a safe environment for first responders who are typically fearful and reluctant to open up is imperative, because that reluctance typically manifests itself in emotional withdrawal and isolation from family and friends. Left unchecked, it potentially devolves into concerns involving increased anger, violence, avoidance, chemical health concerns, and first responder suicides concerns. Since my retirement, I've had the honor to help design, implement, or grow peer support teams as a clinical director for the State Patrol, Duluth PD, Rochester and Olmsted County's peer support team, and currently with Lakeville's peer support team.
30 seconds.
These agencies are just a few of the many departments that have embraced the acute and accumulative aspects of how job can negatively affect them. As I wrap up, one recommendation I might have is to mention that this piece of legislation could be made better if it would define the peer support training required. There are some individuals offering 2 or 4 hour blocks of instruction and calling it peer support. That's not enough time. I spend that amount of time talking about privacy, confidentiality, and protections afforded by current best practices and statutes. As a licensed mental health professional, I can't overemphasize the risks that exist when good-intentioned people with a little bit of training and the approval to do something simply minimize and simplify and minimize expansive teachings necessary for complete and comprehensive training. The most important part of CISM or peer support is the mantra of do no harm. It's better to do nothing than to make things worse. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Doctor. Jim Hilbert from the NAACP State Conference, followed by Andrew Stevenson, private citizen. Mr. Hilbert.
Thank you, Chair Limmer and committee members. My name is Jim Hilbert, ad hoc counsel for the state NAACP and law professor at Mitchell-Hamlin School of Law. I want to speak to Senate File number 3, Law Enforcement Use of Force Reporting Requirements, which has not been the subject of much discussion yet today. I will be very brief. The state NAACP has submitted to this committee a detailed statement with examples of reforms and best practices from other communities that can be of use as you consider your next steps. There's nothing knee-jerk. This is no mystery. These are well-tested, proven models. Our statement also provides a list of the many studies and reports and task forces that have looked at this issue already, made recommendations, which unfortunately have been largely ignored. I think you're getting a consistent message during this hearing, and I'm going to make it too. You have underestimated the level of concern in our state and scope of the problem that you have been called here in this special session to correct. The diagnosis is off and a lot has changed. The people you represent, the people of this great state, have high expectations this time. And as many have said, the eyes of our state are watching to see what you're going to do. The world is watching too. We are the epicenter this time. We are ground zero. Everyone will remember George Floyd. And we will also remember what we did as a state in response, what you did in response. And in responding, we need to honor the pain of those who come here today and whose voices have been telling us for years that something is very wrong with policing in this state. And that's another important point here. This is not just about Minneapolis or a few bad apples. This is a statewide issue and needs statewide action. Senator Limmer, you are right when you said earlier, the state has to act. The state has to step in. As a state, African Americans are nearly 4 times as likely to be killed by law enforcement officers. As for this particular bill on reporting, yes, mandatory reporting of serious and deadly use of force is very important. The voluntary nature of the FBI database has long been a problem for tracking data on police killings. Senator Ingebrigtsen is absolutely right about the importance of reporting. One area for improvement on this bill would make the data more available to the public by way of a website. Senator Limmer is absolutely right about that. And the mechanism to make it easily available to the public is not clear in the bill. It also should be available much sooner. This sort of data is critical to the community. The NAACP would also recommend that you expand on the data that is reported to all use of force, to discipline against police officers. Tracking this information is also important for the public. Since we have submitted our detailed statement to you, I will yield for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hilbert. Moving on to Andrew Stevenson, private citizen, followed by Jillian Nelson from the Autism Society of Minnesota. Mr. Stevenson.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee.
Morning.
Thank you for allowing, I apologize that my face is a bit dark. Thank you for allowing me the time today to testify specifically in support of passage Senate File 3. 5 years ago, FBI Director James Comey spoke about the tenuous dynamic between race and law enforcement. With regards to data collection, he said, "The first step to understanding what is really going on in our communities is to gather more and better data related to those we arrest, those we confront for breaking the law, and those who confront us. It seems dry and boring, but without data, we cannot understand our world and make it better. Without complete and accurate data, we are left with ideological thunderbolts, and that helps spark unrest and distrust and does not help us get better." On January 1st, 2019, after years of coordinating with law enforcement organizations, the National Use of Force Data Collection launched nationwide. However, as the FBI has no legal authority to mandate the reporting of any data, responses from law enforcement have been entirely voluntary. As of May 29th, the FBI estimates that only 40% of all law enforcement officers currently submit information. As Director Comey said 5 years ago, this incomplete picture leaves us with those ideological thunderbolts, the aftermath of which can be seen in Minneapolis at the intersections of either 38th and Chicago or Lake and Minnehaha. While I commend Senator Ingebrigtsen for introducing this bill and showing to the nation Minnesota's commitment to increasing police accountability and oversight, this bill and the others introduced do not go far enough in addressing the inequities within our state today. While I'm hopeful that additional legislation will be forthcoming, I share the doubt many Black people must be feeling right now. We were here 4 years ago with Philando Castile. We are here now with George Floyd. Whose name will we be repeating 4 years from now? In closing, let me echo the sentiments of those Black Minnesotans that have testified during this hearing. I implore each member of this committee and at every level of government in this state to engage in serious introspection, as what has been done in the past has clearly not worked. This moment right now demands new and bold solutions. As someone born and raised in Duluth, the city where Elias Clayton, Elmer Jackson, and Isaac McGee were so viciously lynched, I lift up my support. I lift up my voice in support of racial justice and equality. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. We'll now hear from Jillian Nelson from the Autism Society, followed by Amity Dimmock, a parent advocate. Ms. Nelson.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee. Thank you for taking the time to hear from the community as we tackle important issues during this unprecedented time in history. I'm Jillian Nelson. I'm the Community Resource and Policy Advocate for the Autism Society of Minnesota. I am also an autistic adult. I wanted to come before you today regarding Senate File 1 and commend you for the commitment to increasing training and supporting professional development of Minnesota officers. I'm a firm believer that education is the key to overcoming challenges. As Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you do better. With that in mind, I think it's important that when we look at this level of financial support, that will essentially be a tool to teach Minnesota peace officers to do better. It is important that we do so with guardrails to ensure that this appropriation meets the community concerns. We need to not just grant financial support, but also pass legislation to ensure that we are teaching the necessary proponents to improve our policing system in Minnesota. The 16 hours of mandated training are a start, but we have learned they're not enough. They have not achieved the goals we want for public safety in our communities. With better training on de-escalation, crisis intervention, mental illness, and my own focus, autism, which is Senate File 85, we can give officers the tools and knowledge needed to equitably, safely, and justly protect all citizens in Minnesota. These bills are already on the table. They are just waiting for this committee's support. I hope that Senate File 1 is just that, the first, in a necessary collection that will allow us to come together and truly do better so that all people can feel safe and protected, regardless of race or disability status. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Amity Dimmock is next, followed by Noah McCourt.
My name.
Let me just ask if Noah McCourt is here. I was told he might have left. Mr. McCourt, are you around?
I've been texting him and he said he had something come up.
All right, thank you for that. Ms. Dimmock, are you on board here? Oh, I see you. Please.
Yes. Hi, my name is Amity Dimmock. I am the mother of Kobe Heisler. I am not sure if you guys are familiar with Kobe Heisler, but Kobe Heisler was a 21-year-old person of color on the autism spectrum and identified as gay. He was having a bad day that day and a domestic with his grandparents, and the police were called, as is the situation in many mental health / autism bad days. The families already know how to de-escalate. They've been working with my son and de-escalating for 21 years. So they called the police back, said everything's fine, I didn't need to come. Well, they chose to come anyhow because my son was threatening to hurt himself, because as we know, people with mental health disabilities and autism don't typically hurt other people, they hurt themselves. And so long story short, the police came anyhow, interviewed him for over 12 minutes calmly. And when my son realized that he was going to be put in an involuntary hold for a very long time, he got up. All I know is that there were tasers and gunshots, including to his head. Within moments, my son was dead. It has been 9.5 months, and we still don't have the information that we needed. We don't have an autopsy report. They have, after George Floyd's murder, they did finally show us some videos, but stopped right where we had the question. And I just don't understand how this can be. And I'm a proponent that I support a lot of these bills, as a lot of people have said, is a good starting point, but none of it goes far enough. The training's already been there. I think that with mental health crises responses and autistic, calls, that it should not ever be a police officer that is called into that response. It should be trained mental health professionals. I am 100% sure that my son would be alive if the police officers just would have had respect for the family and what they said. I would also note that this condition in our country, and I'm a person of color. My son looks black. I think the reason why he's not all over the news right now is because he looks like a white kid, and because we haven't been able to get access to videos to show anybody. And that's not fair. So we are actually currently working. I know some are body cams, but we are working on a Kobe's bill to require body cam videos, at the very least, to be provided to the family within 48 hours, next of kin and all that. The condition is so bad that 4 days before my son was murdered, I sit on a board of directors up here for a mental health organization alongside Congressman, oh no, I'm going to blank on his name, but and county commissioners and everything. And I said on August 27th that I was so fearful for the police, that they're afraid to do their jobs. They go into a situation, they just shoot. And then they never, ever, ever get held responsible. There's something about qualified immunity. I saw a situation where apparently the Supreme Court brought this up last week, and there was a young child who got shot in the leg, totally not regarding the incident that the police officer was going on, and those people couldn't even sue. What is up with this qualified immunity? Why are the police officers who should be being held to a higher standard not being held to a standard at all? But I'm actually here to testify in the autism part of the bills, and I support those, but only as a starting point. It does not nearly begin to address what the world is watching for us to do right now. There is no trust. The autism community called us as soon as it happened, and they said that they are not going to call the police anymore because they're scared. And that's not right. And I don't even know what else to say. All that I know is that Jillian, the woman who spoke to me before, actually called, and she apologized for not being able to get bills passed fast enough, because if they would have gotten the bills passed fast enough, maybe my son would be alive. But my son was nonviolent. They had searched him, and then they shot him like an animal. And this is after everything was already okay. They came in and they escalated the situation when they're supposed to be the de-escalators. And my son should be alive. And not only that, but my son should be given the recognition. People should be speaking about his injustice, but I guess he doesn't have enough melatonin in his skin, and we don't have a video for people to get outraged about, and that's not fair. It's been 9.5 months and nothing. 2 days after, and they are able to make a charging decision in George Floyd's case. It's like Mike Freeman just forgot about my son. The BCA completed their investigation in November. It's not, where are our answers? And why is it the training that's already there not working? And so I'm here to restate that the training isn't enough. The community needs to be involved. We need to divert some funds from the police to the professionals that are more equipped to handle it. We cannot continue to expect our police officers to be numerous different professionals. They're not. They're not, and it's not fair to expect it of them. And I am not anti-police. I have 5 police in my family, and I'm willing to work with anybody. and everybody to make sure this doesn't happen to any other family. And it didn't just happen to us, but we have gotten no answers. And so it's trauma on top of trauma. And every time I turn on the news, I see George Floyd, and I just wonder, what about my son? And this is coming from a woman of color. We don't just have a race issue. Of course, we have a deep-seated racial and, systemic racism. But, the stats show that people with mental health illnesses and autism, that they have the highest rates of negative police interactions with police. And if Minnesota knows that we are the state with the second highest rate of people with autism, why are we not the state with the best record on training on autism? Because Minnesota is supposed to be better than that. We should be the best in that arena, and we have failed. And I'm here to speak up for not only the racial injustice, but for the injustices for people with mental illness and autism. And I am also here to offer my assistance with anybody. I took a bunch of names down from some of the testifiers, but there's a lot of people that I need to work with, and I need to be a part of it. Thank you very, very much. This is my son. He was nonviolent. He never hurt anybody. He never hurt anybody but himself. And they knew that. And they came in and they killed him anyhow. The officers outside said the next time that there was a call to my grandparents' house that it would be because my son had killed the grandmother or the grandfather. They came that day assuming my son would become a murderer. And that's how they responded. And there's nothing to back that up. And so I need help to make sure that it's already happened to us, but because it could happen to Noah. It could happen to Jillian. It could happen. We can't allow it to happen anymore. And these bills need to go so much deeper and so much further. And there needs to be accountability. There needs to be accountability. Thank you for letting me speak.
You're very welcome. Thank you for giving your testimony. I know that was difficult for you to do. And frankly, it's difficult for us to hear. Thank you for your time. We're very sorry for your loss, and we're sorry for the circumstances of that loss as well. Thank you again. We'll move on to, I guess Noah McCourt is not here, as was said, Imam Assad Zaman from the Muslim American Society of Minnesota, and then ending with Pani White from the Young Women's Cabinet. Imam Zaman, welcome.
Senators, good morning. I am Imam Assad Zaman, Executive Director of the Muslim American Society of Minnesota and Board Chair of Faith in Minnesota. Today, I wish to speak about the deficiencies of Senate Files 13549 and 104. This package makes some improvements, but is insufficient and will almost certainly not stop the next murder. Derek Chauvin murdered George Floyd in a depraved act of unspeakable evil. He forced every Minnesota Police Department to grapple with the profound loss of trust. Was this brutal murder preventable? Chauvin had 18 complaints. For many years, he was a criminal hiding behind a badge. The system in Minnesota protected him. It enabled his act of violent racism. This is the meaning of systemic racism. It means that the laws, ordinances, regulations, rules, and practices together create an impact that is racist, more racist than a Klansman shouting the N-word. Somewhere in Minnesota, there are other criminals hiding behind a police badge. They have numerous excess force complaints. They could be identified and removed. I am beside myself in grief and frustration at Senate leadership's refusal to hear bills to undo the structural racism. The opening comments said that today we are not going to erase decades of problems. Why not? That is your job. No more waiting. Please fix the problem now. Minnesotans want the recommendation of the Posse Caucus and the Deadly Force Task Force to be given a hearing. Attempts to undo structural racism are being prevented from being heard in the Minnesota Senate. This package of reforms is missing the mark. It would be a failure to protect life and prevent killing. Speaking of a few bad apples, the proverb actually says a few bad apples will spoil the whole barrel. That is exactly what the killer has done. He has eroded the trust and confidence of the community, without which police departments cannot be effective. He has already spoiled or is about to spoil the whole barrel. Senators, either change the system to allow the bad apples to be removed, or deal with the consequences that Minnesotans will stop trusting every police officer for fear that people like Chauvin have not been identified and removed. I acknowledge that you are taking action. However, the Senate's actions are in stark contrast to those of the House. They have already spent 16 hours in 4 hearings, and the Senate is dedicating just 2.5 hours to this one hearing. I urge every senator to not allow the Senate leadership to prevent you from taking a moral stance at this critical point in time. If you feel this package is missing critical pieces needed to take apart the structural racism we currently have, then I urge you to make motions to amend these bills to add them. Force everyone on this committee to take a position and declare where they stand. I urge you to attempt to amend this bill on the Senate floor so every single senator is forced to declare the matter not relevant or germane. Take a stance. Force everyone to take a stance. Thank you.
Thank you, Imam. We'll next move to Pawnee White. Ms. White, welcome to the committee.
Hi, my name is pronounced Pony. Yeah. And I'm a member of the Young Women's Cabinet. And today I just wanted to speak because I've been a frontline organizer for some of the protests that have been going on, and also just collecting mutual aid funds for people in the community. I feel like a lot of the bills or the proposals that are being thrown out kind of lack that community aspect. I think it's insulting, and it goes to that it's slightly racist also, that there's never room for like community involvement, that we're not focused on that enough, that we think that more policing is going to, I guess, give us the results that we're looking for. And as other people have shared, that has not been the case in just regular day, and then with this crisis, thinking that bringing in militarized force. I dealt with a couple of nights where I was trying to pick up people from protest rallies where police were tear gassing us. I was forced out of my car while I was explaining that you're asking people to leave. I'm here to pick people up to take them home safely, and I'm being tear gassed and told to get out of my car and walk home. They're shooting people's tires and telling them to leave, but you're shooting their tires. So I feel like a lot of these bills that have kind of been proposed, I'm not necessarily seeing what angle you're allowing community members to come in. There are community leaders, there are Black community leaders that hold a lot of weight. And I feel like that's what should have happened in the beginning before we went and brought in military forces. I think that's the type of direction that we needed. I'm here to speak on Senate File 1. As a lot of people have already stated, and I feel like I'm being very redundant because I think a lot of people that spoke very well, but I feel as if this lacks, I guess, direction, and also who's to say that officers are completing this? Like who's to say that that person took this the peace officer training seriously, and that they actually can apply that in their work? We don't know that, and that's where we say that training doesn't work. It's not that we don't believe that officers have been trained. We believe that because we see that when we see officers being able to de-escalate a situation with a white masked shooter, when we see officers being able to de-escalate a situation when a white person is called in for rape. We've seen that happen for certain and specific groups and specific people. We don't know how that's going to apply for us. We're not sure where training comes in to train someone not to be implicitly racist, to train someone to care about this community that they're not from. And that's another thing. A lot of these officers are not from the communities which they police. They're not from here. They don't know these people. They don't understand their struggles. How are you teaching that? And also, how are you teaching that with more police? I feel like that's a lot of the conflicts that we're seeing, that you're trying to fix a police situation by adding more police and adding more military and pretty much keeping out the community. And so I thank you for listening to us all speak today. And I'm very grateful that people got to share a lot of factual things. And I just hope that while you're continuing to consider a lot of these different bills and different policies, that you really thoroughly investigate this community and allow their voices to be heard and stop adding more police force. That's not what we want. That's what people have been telling you that's not what they want. And so I want that to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. White. Ms. White was the last testifier in this segment, and we'll be opening it up for committee discussion. Any of the bills that we've discussed are open for discussion by committee members. So we will open now. You can raise your hand through the Zoom process, and I'll try and figure out how to make this all work. I may want to make a comment. As I stated in the very beginning, I don't believe any one single or a group of pieces of legislation is going to immediately solve racism that we have experienced or suspect. Oftentimes, as I've looked at the writing of legislation, I think we put an over-reliance on lawmaking to cure problems, and I don't believe that it always does. We're a reactive body, usually most democracies are, and we respond to a crisis. But it's rare that we try to be proactive. This may be that time to do so, but nevertheless, it's going to take a lot deeper work than just writing a law to solve the problems in Minnesota. We also have to acknowledge that at least in the city of Minneapolis, there's another partner to making proper law enforcement authority, and that would be the city council. City council is referenced in their charter of being the one that is supposed to have a responsible police force. They revisit the collective bargaining contract every 2 years, and that would be a time when they could raise some of these issues as well and decide not to approve collective bargaining agreements until changes occur. So as we try to unravel the issues before us, it's important to realize there's more than just one party or entity that at least is creating the atmosphere in Minneapolis. We also, as I look at it, I believe that no matter what we do, we're trying to respond in a first step during a special session that has limited time. And this is not going to be the last step. I think we have to continue this discussion regardless of the outcome of November's election. So as we go forward, I hope that we can keep all of this in mind. I see that Senator Dietzig would like to jump in here. So Senator Dietzig, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you, Chair Limmer, and thank you to the testifiers. I think that was very helpful. I have a few, I'll start with general comments, a quick question, and then another question. So first I want to point out in the city of Minneapolis, since I represent the city of Minneapolis or a portion of the city of Minneapolis, that the mayor actually controls the police, not the city council. City council and the citizens of Minneapolis have the ability to put a charter amendment forward, and that is their right, but the mayor actually controls the police. You also raised the issue about that the city council and or the mayor could review the police contract, and that contract I think did expire in December 31st, 2019. So they are going on the past contract, and I believe the police chief just said that they're at the moment withdrawing from negotiations. So the council, I believe, is reviewing what that contract, what that contract says and what they are going to be doing. So I just wanted to clarify that for the record. Then I had a question for, I believe it was Mr. Hutton with the Sheriff's Association, if he is still on. I thought I heard him say that they are going to remove the chokehold from policy. And so I was just wondering what that means. Does that mean they're banning it?
Mr. Hutton.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. Nope. If I did say that, I misspoke. What I did say that there is, that is currently in the Lexipol policy, the use of chokehold, but only in a deadly force situation. What I did say is individual sheriffs throughout the state of Minnesota are currently reviewing that to be removed. I know there are several counties that I've already spoken with that have removed that from policy, meaning banning it, not allowing it.
Pardon me, Senator. Director Hutton, Lexipol, could you tell us and tell the members and the audience what Lexipol is? We relied on some of Lexipol's research to write a portion of one of these bills. And if you could just inform the public what Lexipol is.
Certainly, thank you. Lexipol is a policy manual that is used in Minnesota and many other states many other states in the United States. It's an outside firm, if you will, that reviews each state's statutes, federal decisions, local decisions, state decisions, and corrects policy, or I shouldn't say corrects policy, reviews policy twice each year. So if there is a decision within the state of Minnesota or a change in law, then those recommendations are made to the individual sheriff's offices, allowing them to correct that policy or include the legal decisions within the policy. And then there's training that is associated with that. So there are what we call daily training bulletins, DTBs, that where individuals within each of the sheriff's offices are trained on a policy daily.
All right, thank you, Senator Gietzig.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Nope, that's okay. I think I have a lot of questions on Lexipol, but I think that'll be for another hearing another day. So I just want to make sure I heard this correctly. So the sheriffs are not removing the chokehold from the policy, but possibly individual sheriffs and their organizations across the state are reviewing it and maybe banning it. Is that correct?
Mr. Hutton?
Thank you, Chair. Senator, yes, that is mostly correct. So the conversations that I've had with many of the sheriffs and obviously the conversations that they're having daily, that is a decision that they are making, is removing it and banning it from the policy. Correct.
All right. Senator Gietzig?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on my bills here. So if we go to, I believe, your bill, Senate File 104. And again, I thought I heard at one point that, again, correct me if I'm wrong, did you say that you were banning chokeholds?
Are you asking me, Senator Gietzig?
Yes.
Yes. Matter of fact, why don't we have our research explain that particular answer? I see it, I think, in lines 120 through 123 and onto the back page, but let's hear from Mr. Backus.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair and members. You're correct. If you look at lines 1.20 to 2.2 of the bill, what that does is it requires that the model policy, and then later in the bill, locals and other state law enforcement offices will have to adopt a policy that's identical or is substantively similar to the model policy. But the policies have to include a prohibition on peace officers from using, and if you look on line 2.23, it's the carotid control or neck restraints or chokeholds that restrict airways. There's an exception for that if the peace officer is acting in a situation where there's an imminent threat to the peace officer or another person for great bodily harm or death. But even in those circumstances, the policy must require that less lethal measures be considered by the officer.
That was on page 1.23.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it's not a complete ban, but it is a ban unless it is imminently threatens the officer. So it's a legal use of force for imminent threat. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair and Senator Dzieck, I think that, you know, we're talking right here what the policy would include. I think that there would still presumably be an independent determination as to whether that fits in with the legal use of force under, I think it's 609.066.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then can you, thank you, Mr. Chair, thank you, Mr. Backus, follow up. So on line 1.23, the cartwright control or neck restraints or chokeholds that restrict airways. So I know I had a lot of discussions with many people and did a lot of review on trying to find that, what that means. And so I was just curious where you got that definition. And then, so there's the carotid restraint, which I believe is a method of rendering a person unconscious by restricting the flow of blood to the brain. And then there is a stranglehold, which is also known as a sleeper hold. And that, again, temporarily cuts off blood flow to the brain. And then there's the chokehold, which actually restricts the person's ability to breathe. So where did you get that? And is that kind of your understanding of what these terminologies mean?
Mr. Backus or Mr. Hutton, do you have anything to add to this question? I believe it came from the Lexapol reference that we discussed earlier.
Mr. Chair, members, I don't know that I could speak directly to that. Perhaps Mr. Hutton or someone else could. Right. I would point out, though, that, you know, the bill, Senate File 104, it puts these kind of minimums in place, and then it would require the post board ultimately to maybe tweak some of the language or to decide, you know, Senator Dzieck's question about strangleholds versus chokeholds, things like that. I don't think it's intended to really specifically address those distinctions, but I'll defer to someone else on that.
Mr. Hutton, could you help us out here?
I'll give it a shot, Mr. Chair. So I believe some of this language did come from Lexapol. So if I can speak a little bit more to Lexapol, it sets a standard. And then obviously based on what is in the law. And if sheriffs choose to ban any use of a neck restraint, he or she may do that for their agency as well. So again, if the standard is set by statute, then it would allow the sheriff to be more restrictive, if you will, with the use of force.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Just a quick follow-up. So, and then I also just kind of, it's a question or a comment. And so Mr. Chauvin actually used a knee to the neck. And so is that considered so what he did was wrong on like so many levels. The lack of humanity was just beyond shocking. And so I'll just first put that out. But the question is, so he put a knee to the neck. And so would that be under these restraints? So would that, what he was doing with just a knee to the neck, which is usually when you think of the chokehold and stranglehold, people are using their arm around the neck. So would what he did qualify on line 1.23?
Director Hutton.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Senator, absolutely and unequivocally, it is not acceptable. If you need stronger language, it may be inappropriate for me to say.
I've been told that a neck restraint is designed for or intended to restrict airways. And I would think that it would fall under the neck restraint definition. We could certainly isolate it in the legislation. Any other questions?
I think I had one other one. So I want to just clarify that in the Senate File 3, on line 1.8. So,
Senator, if I could just interrupt, just giving a little note here. Director Hutton was talking about current law, but the bill that we have before us would require locals to use this new policy.
okay.
It wouldn't be an optional method like we have under existing law now.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And then my last question on Senate File 3, on line 1.8. So we have serious bodily harm or death. And I believe I heard somebody say that that's the federal definition. So I don't believe that is in our statute. And so is that a problem? Do we need to, I mean, we're kind of using, you know, they're reporting to the FBI, and then we've got our statutes too. And so is that a problem, or does that create a problem? Because we don't have, I don't believe we have that in our statutes.
You're on Senate File 3.
Yep, line 1.8.
Why don't we go to the author, Senator Ingebrigtsen? Senator Ingebrigtsen, would you want Senator Dietzig to ask the question again, or perhaps if Mr. Backus could join us on this question as well?
Yeah, I'm here, Senator, but Mr. Backus, you could certainly answer it if you'd like. I just had a hard time getting off of my my two spots here. Senator Dietzig, would you please repeat the question? I'm sorry.
So on line 1.8, it says serious bodily harm or death. And I didn't find that in our statute, so I don't know if that's a problem. We use the term great bodily harm or substantial bodily harm, I believe, in 609, but not serious bodily harm. So I don't know if that creates an inconsistency, or if the locals are already sending stuff to the FBI that it's not a problem.
Mr. Backus, would you define the difference there that the statute identifies that she's asking a question about?
Mr. Backus?
Yes, Mr. Chair and members. Yeah, I did point that out earlier. Serious bodily harm, which is the term used in Senate File 3, it's not really a concept we use necessarily in our laws. We, as Senator Dietzig mentioned, we usually refer to either substantial bodily harm or great bodily harm, both of which are defined terms. So I guess perhaps there might be some ambiguity as to what level of injury rises to serious bodily harm. I guess it might be a little clearer if you refer to one of the other two defined terms. At the same time, I don't know how serious an issue it is. It's just a question of really how much direction and clarity you want to give. Again, serious bodily harm is the language, I believe, from the federal program, and that's why it's there, I believe.
And thanks. And Senator Dietzig, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just thinking that the serious, I think that's what the feds and the BCA are looking for. I don't think they're looking for every little, I don't want to minimize it at all, but every scratch or tear of clothing or something incident to an arrest or an officer's hand getting scuffed up or anything like that. But when it comes to more serious stuff, I think that's kind of what we're after. I think you would agree with that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Senator Hall, you had your hand up earlier and then you blinked it off. Did you want to ask a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I don't have a question. I'd just like to make a comment. First off, thank you to you, Mr. Chair, for allowing us to have this discussion. A lot of great discussion here, in one sense on both sides, but I think it's real important that we listen to each other. I appreciate the reforms we're doing here. That I was raised and born in South Minneapolis, and I really have a heart for the people down there. Of course, I've got grandkids down there as well as my mother that still lives in South Minneapolis. And I heard more from everybody, but especially from a few about trust. And I think that's maybe our core issue here is trust. And I know for myself, I'm re-examining kind of my heart in this whole thing. And am I seeing things wrong? Am I seeing things differently, and why? So it's kind of a paradigm shift. I think that all of us need to re-examine ourselves. But we need this community discussion. And I think this is just a start. And I pray that our ears and our hearts will be open as we really listen to each other and the data here. This has been really good, Chair Limmer. And again, I want to thank you and everybody else for being a part of this.
Thank you. The next person on our list is Senator Latz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Actually, I want to thank Senator Hall for his comments about viewing this possibly as a paradigm shift. I think we need to be open to that, because for too long, I think we haven't understood the nature of the relationship between police and communities of color, especially the Black community. And I think we need to view it through that lens in order to help understand what we need to do as policymakers. I want to especially note the participation of the Honorable LaJune Lang in this hearing. Judge Lang was a groundbreaking judge in Hennepin County. She was a former co-vice chair of the Minnesota Supreme Court Task Force on Racial Bias in the Courts. She's an adjunct professor of civil rights and human rights at the William Mitchell College of Law. So she's a bit modest to share that background with us, but I thought it was important to recognize the platform from which she expresses her views. I also want to thank the other testifiers. Nothing I can say can better express the stakes involved and the remedies that are necessary than what they have already said. That said, I'm going to give it a try here. We have a moment in time now to make serious progress in reforming the way public safety happens in our communities, in the way our police officers handle various situations, and in the way communities view police officers. Some of the proposals are quite straightforward and have been around for a long time. Some of them have been introduced as bills in the legislature, including by me, but were not granted hearings by the committee chair. Even something as simple as adding 2 more public members to the post board. While some may say go slow or discuss more, I paraphrase Hubert Humphrey, who in 1948 said we were 172 years too late. Well, we are now 224 years too late. Our starting point was 1776, the year the colonies declared our independence from the King of England, and within a few years adopted a constitution that did not recognize African Americans as full human beings, but rather essentially as chattel. Some members of law enforcement are still stuck in that viewpoint. Now, I firmly believe that almost all police officers are good-hearted, well-intentioned professionals. Yet, enough are not, and enough of those who are not are concentrated in some communities, and enough who are remain silent as to their rotten colleagues, that the harmful attitude persists in certain places around the state, and especially in parts of Minneapolis. So, how does the Senate Judiciary and Public Safety Committee address this problem? 3 weeks after the death of George Floyd, we have a committee hearing on 24 hours notice that was developed behind closed doors, a narrow and limited agenda dictated without consultation across the aisle, and to my knowledge, with only limited, if any, consultation with communities of color. Bills that mostly nibble around the edges of the problem. A hearing for informational purposes only, without substantial opportunity to dissect the language of proposed legislation, let alone amend them, and then a rush to the Senate floor within 1 hour after the committee hearing ends for what I expect will be a vote for show. This is exactly the worst way to make legislation. In my judgment, it does not reflect a serious attempt to pass far-reaching and necessary changes. The next few days will tell us a lot. If the majority clearly engages with the House to find common ground, then we can do much. If the majority sticks tight to this small agenda, refuses to accept substantial House proposals, gives up, and adjourns without reaching agreement, then we will do little to nothing. This is a measure of our calling as public servants to serve this public, to rise to this occasion. I call upon our chair and the Senate majority to do just that.
Thank you, Senator Latz. Is there any other questions or discussion? Senator Latz, apparently there is not. As I said before, as we've had this discussion today.
Senator Ingebrigtsen has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Limmer. And I want to thank you, as senators have all said, for coming forth with the what I think is meaningful legislation here. And some are thinking we're just biting along the edges. It's interesting. I've been sitting back and watching this now for some time, and I watched the House come with their proposals and listening to some of the testifiers. And thank you, by the way, for all the testifiers, very emotional testifiers that come before us. I not once did I hear anything about some of the things that I'm very concerned about, and all of my constituents, and I think everybody's, is that there was an action taken by the Minneapolis City Council, and Senator Dietzig, you made it very clear that the City Council doesn't run the police department; the mayor does. Well, there's an awful lot of blame to go around, I guess. But bottom line is, we got to get beyond that. I'm trying to get myself beyond a city council that would actually disband or defund the police department. I don't care what city it is. And you know, I'm glad that the chief is acting the way he is. He walked away from the negotiations with the officers union there, a union that, you know, was set up years and years ago and allowed in communities. And it has become really unfortunate that officers can't be reprimanded because the union stands in the way. It's really no different than the teachers union or other unions, public unions, where if you have bad apples, bad players, I agree they should be. They should be. After being a CEO of a law enforcement department for as many years as I did, I understand that. And those that are doing it right, and Senator Latz, you're correct. Most of the officers are doing it right. They should see what happens to those that are doing it wrong, because it's one bad apple does smell up the whole tree. But you know, I really struggle with a lot of this. I was asked to be on this committee that that went on for the previous 8 months, and the first hour and 45 minutes, I was taken aback. I was appalled at the activity that came in there with signs that were saying cops are murderers, kill a cop, save a kid. This was allowed to go on for an hour and 45 minutes, and I was really troubled by that. I think a lot of members on the committee were. So there's really a lot of anger. There's no question about it. Those people were very serious about what they were talking about, but it's really hard. It's really hard when that kind of a platform is allowed to sound off over a meeting of a bunch of people that are coming together with great intentions to try and change these things. But let's not forget where this has happened. I'm a rural legislator. Our governor, our mayor of Minneapolis, and the city council really, really let the public down by standing out of the way, standing down, letting the 3rd precinct burn. I'm very frustrated and taken back. And now that's a different issue than what a lot of you were talking about today, and that's racism. And that has to be dealt with. And I have to be like Senator Hall. I have to reevaluate myself. And I think we all do. We have to start thinking from the heart, reacting from the heart instead of instead of reacting to the fires and the burning and the devastation that went on. And I'm very troubled by that. And I know the governor is going to be coming asking for all of Minnesota to pay for this when he actually stood down. And I'm going to have a real hard time with that. I really am. In fact, those dollars could be better spent, as we all know, to put a better professional out there in the squad car. And frankly, they need to get out of the car. They need to start talking to the communities. They need to start talking to the kids. That's the old basic police way of getting out on the beat, getting to know your people in the community. Spend those dollars on that. It's really troubling when the chief comes and says, I need 400 officers, and the city council responds with 12. 12. I just don't understand. So my thing, whenever I've gone out to the public and talked about the profession that I love so dear, and that's law enforcement, I always tell them that the officer and the department is going to be only as good as the community allows you to be. So we got a lot of repairing to do. Minneapolis has got a lot of issues, have had for some time. Maybe they're too big for the local community to handle. Maybe somebody from outside should come in and reevaluate it. But the violent protests, the 200 burning buildings, the third precinct burning down is just unacceptable, and the community should not be happy and proud. And I know they're not. I know they're just not proud of that. And so I'm going to be more than happy to move along and work with the senator, Chair Limmer, with regards to new legislation that makes sense. But I will not vote to hamper the good law enforcement professionals out there that are now going to be affected by one or two bad apples. And those bad apples, by the way, are now arrested, in jail, and being dealt with. So I know those are kind of harsh comments, but I had to get that out. I had to say that, and I stand for anybody that has any questions for me. But it was quite interesting. I never heard anything about the defunding from all the testifiers here, and I was just wondering why.
Further discussion. We're at the 11 o'clock hour, a little over that, but I did want to make some comments. The comments that I wanted to make, as you can tell, this is a rather complex issue. It's got a lot of different appendages to it. The backdrop is you have, of course, the crisis that happened a few weeks ago with the George Floyd death and the result in the rioting that went on after that. The rioting, the management of emergency response also was an issue. And I believe that's also a part of it, but not the main part. The concern I have is that local cities kind of are the masters of their own house. We in the Senate establish a set of parameters to work within, but then the departments and the cities have their own brand of fine-tuning some of those policies, reflective of the community that they serve. In looking at this, my intention was to create, not nibble at the edges, but start laying a foundation for further discussion. The timing involved in it we weren't really talking much about police accountability in the general session that we had earlier. That got spiked up by the George Floyd incident. Now it's the main focus. That was roughly about 2.5 weeks ago, thereabouts. And during that same time, to give credit to the House and the Commission on Police and Deadly Force Commission, they were moving in that direction as well. So we are playing a little bit of a catch up on the police reform or police accountability issue. Like I said, I'm hoping it was a foundation to begin from. I would not like anyone to characterize it as something that we're a one one quick blast of legislation and we dust our hands off thinking there it's done. No, there's much deeper issues here. There's an element of trust that is going to take some time to develop. It is kind of sad that the state has to get involved in response to some of the failures that happen in local communities, but we are up to that task. I'm intending on having discussion with other members in the legislature, especially with our leadership, as well as with perhaps the leadership of the House, or at least those affected. And we will keep moving and talking. I have no clue of how long this special session will last. We've heard the limitations. We all know that. But right now, these are things that we can immediately do. And we'll have to just take one step at a time. There are a lot of good ideas, and there are ideas that need to be burrowed into a little bit, a lot of detail that needs to be aired. I don't know if we're going to have time to do that all in a special session. But nevertheless, this is what we have before us. And if there's any other further discussion, if there is none, I think our business is over. This was never intended to be a voting committee hearing. It was a session for information, and we certainly got a lot. Senator Hall, I greatly appreciated your comments, especially regarding a paradigm shift. And I think it's important, as you say, to listen to each other. Listening, talking, strategizing. If you want a quality product, that takes time. Is there anyone else who'd wish to make comment at this time? Hearing none, I think our committee is done for the day, and we will stand adjourned. Thank you all for participating, especially for those who gave testimony and had to sit and wait and listen to it all. We thank you very much.